I'll mention what is their plan to deal with real police abuse? What is a real plan of affordable housing? Because the enablers, and there's many of those that I'm opposing, including my own, the guy I supported before, Joe Moore, who's become an enabler. They're smart. They're no dummies. And they know how to talk out of both sides of their mouth. Okay? So that does make it harder for the challengers. Okay? But by and large, the public gets that. The public senses that. But it's helpful the more information they can get. So I'm not sure what else you mean about strategically, but the good news is there's lots of good candidates, and what I'd be most concerned about, wanting a progressive city council, and I use that word meaning this sensitive to these problems of race and inequality, spend the money wiser, not tax us for everything, but use the money wisely, and we don't do that now. But there's a lot of good candidates, and the real struggle here is if some of the lesser candidates get into a runoff with one of the good candidates running, because there's many good candidates in every ward running, the real battle will be in the runoffs. Mm-hmm. And hopefully there'll be kind of a collective working together to change, throw these old guys out and start over.
What I mean by strategically is, so, say I want to get behind Lori Lightfoot. I believe that she's truly has some progressive policy ideas. She's really detached from what we see as the political machine in Chicago, but, she's polling lower, and I want to, make sure that my vote goes to supporting someone who has a chance of, being in the runoff and maybe beating Bill Daley, because I don't want to see another Daley in City Hall. Is that something to think about?
Well, again, remember, different ways to look at it. It also depends on what you really think of the other candidates, too. See, at one level, what people like you might say, you know what, I am not sure at this moment. I mean, for example, if there's polls out showing Tony at 13% and Lori at 7%, and that was before she got the big Sun-Times endorsement or ad started, well, maybe blah, blah, blah. But one way to look at it like this, if people think they want to vote for who they think is the best, even though they're not sure if that person will get in the runoff, they should do it because here's the key. Like, let's say Lori Lightfoot doesn't get in the runoffs. But let's say Lori Lightfoot moves up and she got up there pretty high. That sends a signal to all the other candidates, okay? Despite what we're all talking about, the rest of us, she had support, okay? See, in the long run, our ideal is to elect that person we think will do what we believe in without all our pressure. But realistically, the rest of our time is we want to push these issues. So whoever gets elected, they may not be our top choice, but we're going to work, hopefully with some good aldermen and collaborative, community groups, because we're going to push this. You've heard me say this. Most politicians are followers. You put pressure on most of these people, and they will follow.
So that brings us to our last question. How does one mount a progressive campaign that is successful in Chicago for future election cycles?
Well, for one, the right candidate, okay, and there's some talented people, but they're just not always the right candidate. They may be really smart, but they don't communicate as well. So having a group of people that really want to bring change, picking the right candidate, okay? This is not whatever individual wants to go. It's what we as a group think. And then having real campaigns. Things have changed, of course, since I first started, do flyers still, but of course now we have all the social media. I think it's important to kind of take it, be very, very tough, not nasty, but just tough. These are what we believe in. I think many of the candidates, the lack of experience means they don't kind of go for the jugular when they should. Now, what I mean by that, because it's so easy for incumbents who have more money and can put out a newsletter or an email every day about all the things they're doing. I'm kind of making fun of my alderman, Joe Moore, because all of a sudden, come to the free thing here, come to the Loyola game free, everything's free, and I don't know, who's paying for all this stuff,
Yeah.
All right before the election. That's the old Roman, circus and
circus
bread and
and
roses.
bread,
So you got to look beyond that into what are the most important issues, and not everybody agrees on that. But so a progressive campaign is always looking to how can we make structural change, okay? And it's not that hard in Chicago. We say we don't have any money, but we have this pot of gold in TIF money. And like I say, we're talking about $1.4 billion on this one development. We're talking about at least 90 million or how much for the police thing on the far west side, but many people don't want. And I could go on and on. There is money there to do legitimate development. Or maybe what many people want in these communities is they want not just more, quote, police, they want better use of the resources to deal with the deeper problems, which makes a lot of sense. There's a reason why Chicago has more problems than New York or L.A. when it comes to affordable housing, police abuse, education, and other things. And that's partly because of this old political system that is so ingrained, and even though it's not what it was when Old Man Daly was there, it's still there. So progressivism challenges that. And what many of these enablers try and do is they try and say, oh, I'm challenged, I'm independent too, I pick and choose which things. Well, the fact is most of that's BS, but they're hoping they're not going to be like a Burke, because he had raw power to do whatever he wanted, but they're going to be like a more sophisticated, updated machine guy.
I have one last question. Are you optimistic when it comes to changes in city council? Do you think that there's possibility for certain aldermen to get voted out, potentially?
I think it's enormous. I think no matter what the result is, there's some really good stuff going on. I mean, Ed Burke is really threatened. Pat O'Connor is really threatened. Joe Moore is really threatened. Emma Mitz is really threatened. People are changing their minds. I won't mention names, but certain aldermen that yesterday were supporting Lincoln Yards, all of a sudden several of their opponents are attacking it. They just switched. So pressure always helps, okay? So I'm optimistic, but I think the key part we have to have is not just winning some of these races. You don't have to win to make progress. You can come close, and that incumbent, they move like in the 46th ward, for example. Their incumbent there, who got to take over Solis in the zoning committee, okay, he was forced to come out and say some things about Lincoln Yards. He didn't want to. That's the pressure. Okay, so there's different ways to win. The best, of course, is to win good people, but I'm fairly hopeful that there is going to be a continuing organizing effort at the grassroots to help the good alderman or the good mayor or whatever it may be, the good state reps, because they really need the help, and to kick holy hell against those, which is what you need. You have to make these people accountable. The genius of the old way is not holding them accountable. Not holding them accountable, which means, well, gee, I don't understand that vote. I thought the alderman said he was on the right side. I don't understand. Aldermen are really good at that, and politicians are very good at covering their tracks. Our job is to make it easier for the public to see who's telling the truth and who's not.
David Orr, thank you so much for your time today. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
As China's role grows greater on the global stage, you want to stay up to date on the issues most pressing to China both domestically and internationally. Check out the Just China podcast for in-depth analysis on recent headlines and investigative reports on Chinese matters that affect our globalized world. We are Just China. Find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy your podcast listening.
And we're back with Chicago Hot Takes. We have David Orr in front of us.
Your favorite restaurant in Chicago?
Oh, Jesus. Well, I have different reasons. For example, I was a big fan of the Heartland Cafe because that was our hangout place, which is now gone. It wasn't necessarily for the food. It was just a great hangout place.
Are you a Cubs guy or a Sox guy?
I was raised a Sox fan, but since I was raised in the suburbs, I never had that north side, south side. And so, frankly, I like both of them. It's not a cop-out. I just do. I don't even like it when they play each other. But given Sox have had a hard time for quite a while.
Do you have a favorite Chicago neighborhood excluding where you currently live?
I like Edgewater a lot. I like Logan Square a lot.
This is a real hot one. Best pizza in Chicago.
I'm kind of old-fashioned. I like, I guess, Giandaro's.
Do you have a favorite Chicago tradition?
My favorite tradition is watching my colleagues go to jail.
Oh, that has to be the best.
I want something different than all these cornball things here.
What can you not live without in a Chicago winter?
Heat. My
important.
bedroom up until a week ago had no heat. So,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
I guess you missed the polar vortex, so that was good.
No, I was so happy about that. Not for you all.
And lastly, what issue do you think Chicagoans should be paying more attention to?
To what the candidates really mean or what their real track record is, not just what they say.
Unsure of who to vote for or where to go to vote?
To learn more about the candidates and their platforms, be sure to check out Ballotpedia, ushivotes.org, and also WBEZ has compiled a great interactive questionnaire on the mayoral candidates' stances on the critical issues in this election.
Also, check out chicagoelections.com if you're unsure of where to vote. And remember, if you're not registered to vote, you can register in person on the day of the election.
We'll be sure to include the links to these websites in the description of this episode.
This episode was hosted, produced, and edited by me, Steve Crano.
And me, Kyra Sturgill. Thank you to Blake Daniels for our theme music from UC3P, University of Chicago Public Policy Podcasts.
This is Chicagoland. We'll see you next time.